Ben ritrovati, con qualche minuto di ritardo diamo inizio a questa terza ed ultima giornata.
Good morning everyone, sorry for the few minutes of delay. We resume the works of this conference with the program of today with 3 different reports, 2 online and 1 in presence, and the families which will be delivered by Vittorino Rodaro. So I invite to please come on the stage the next speaker, Alessandro Martinelli. He is the director of Caritas and administrator of the Foundation Comunità Solidale since 2018, and
Dal 2019 è amministratore delegato della
he is director of the Foundation Comunità Solidale belonging to Caritas. I would like to remind you that Caritas is among one of the founding members of Trentini nel Mondo in 1957. Caritas, together with the Foundation, promotes activities connected with the reception of homeless people, specific projects for asylum seekers, social activities for disadvantaged people, and to insert them into the society. He belongs to the Caritas group of the northern east part of Italy, and since 2019 he is also a member of the provincial government. He's going to deliver a speech about the repercussions of the pandemic on mobility and economic conditions of families. So please welcome. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. On my behalf, I'm really glad to be here. It is an honor to be here, because the Foundation Comunità Solidale is an institution which participated in the birth, in the creation of Trentini nel Mondo, and also because I am glad to be here to greet you on behalf of the Church of Trento and of the Bishop Lauro, on behalf of whom I'm greeting you today. I thank you already for the attention you're going to give me for a few thoughts that I would like to share with you as far as the economic condition is concerned and the activity of Caritas in Trentino. I would like to start from a concept which is fundamental for me. Every history is always marked by differences, by diversity, by a variety of events, relationships, and different thinking. But in some moments, the difference, as opposed of its value, of its developing otherness, that is, other than teaching us to grasp the need of others and the need to build communities starting from diversity, seems to have opened their eyes. The difference seems to have strengthened only traces of non-equity, of non-respect, non-participation, or signs of injustice, by strengthening a system that, instead of understanding inequality, on the contrary, has only favored a stronger detachment and increasingly complex relationships. The days we're living do nothing but highlight a social model that we have built over time in a predictable way, also in its basic inequality, or rather starting from inequality, and which seemed to support a sort of status quo, a fragile balance between the demands of everyday life and the increasingly less controlled precariousness. Over the last few years, and I'm thinking of the motto we had during the pandemic, everything will be all right, we understood that the situation was more complicated, and these times made the fragile balance increasingly less stable, more and more complicated, full of difficulties and clearer separations. The reality of today shows that we are not on the same potential, but we are all in a difficult situation. And not everyone has the same potential. Some people still have the right tools, some people try to survive, and some risk to drown. An apparent economic success and the type of life which sometimes went beyond our means have contributed to this balance now lost, which gave way to loneliness, fear, and anger, which transformed itself into inhospitality. We have chosen to live according to our stubborn identities, self-centered identities, defending only ourselves, where each one of us was sufficient for their own need. In Caritas, we witnessed the fact that everyone was categorized as a need because of their need before being considered a human creature. During the first months of the pandemic, at the beginning of 2020, we experienced feelings of disorientation, fear, even if they were slightly covered by a lot of experiences of solidarity and community participation. It was a time full of slogans, cooperation, and to an emotional behavior, and therefore something was lost. This didn't last long. The crisis came. The great suspension of work, of the activities and the community participation led, as a first consequence, to a lack of income. Job losses led to relationships which were marked by distress and anxiety, as well as a conflict between generations. Young people with a lot of disorientation, and adults who suddenly became elderly. In a short time, the rent, the unpaid bills, the bank loan, medical treatments, and also the need to have a functioning internet network to communicate highlighted a reality which had transformed very fast, and we hadn't taken that into consideration. The shopping voucher, which identified the poor as the hungry, has become a support for thousands of families here in Trentino. Those who were able to get on in their daily routine have had to give their history up. Those who thought that they had reached a certain level of stability lost all points of reference very suddenly. And we found us in front of a word which was usually intended for the homeless, for other people, for foreigners, and the word was poverty. And today, poverty unfortunately affects an increasingly high number of people. A poverty with new characteristics, which is not only an economic poverty, but also and above all, a relational and educational poverty. And a poverty of thinking. Some data through the Caritas services show this new situation. In Trento alone, compared to 800 shopping vouchers distributed in 2019, over 2,000 of them were distributed in the first 6 months of 2020, and over 50% of the solidarity was given to local people. The 46 Caritas counseling centers experienced 3 times a tripled service, and the demands do not seem to stop, and they are increasing day by day, and in some cases the situation is really dramatic. The diocese has opened a special fund to support in 1 year and a half, with almost 600,000 euros, almost 3,000 families. The doors of Caritas seemed to be a sort of last resort, a last chance of being saved in the face of the impossibility of finding other open doors. We would have never thought of coming here for help. We hear these repeated every day because they find themselves unexpectedly poor, and the gap between the rich and the poor is not closing. I would like to underline a couple of ideas by the sociologist Chiara Saraceno. She says, precisely because the increase of the absolute poverty is a direct effect of the measures taken to combat the pandemic, we should not be surprised that the greatest increase occurred in the northern regions of Italy, because last year they have been affected earlier and longer by the lockdown, and because they have a greater concentration of companies and activities. The north-south gap, therefore, narrowed not due to the improvement of the situation in the south, but due to the expansion of the area of vulnerability, also to regions and social groups that seemed more protected. Finally, although the vast majority of families in absolute poverty are composed only by Italians, the rate is much higher in families where there is at least one foreigner, because among foreigners, in fact, poor workers are concentrated, often without or with scarce social security and welfare coverage. The data of the 4th surveys carried out by Caritas Italia show that 1 in 4 people, unknown to the services, became impoverished due to the housing problem from September 2020 to March March 2021. 53% of the drama involved women, mothers in particular, with an even higher percentage when it comes to foreigners. Those who had irregular jobs, precarious or occasional jobs, had to stay home, and poverty has increased situations of school troubles, where not only the purchase of a computer to follow the lessons online, but also, for example, the suspension of the canteen service has strengthened this crisis. The housing problem has become a discriminating factor. We saw how in these months relation discomfort has increased. Those who could not sustain a relationship experienced this time considering the house as a place of restlessness, even of fear, loneliness, a sense of abandonment, states of anxiety are not only attributable to the elderly. Traits of mental illness are found in a very high percentage of young people. 80% of Caritas in Italy report a dangerous increase in psychosocial troubles in the young people, which goes hand in hand with the growth of domestic violence. This is also demonstrated by the tragic data relating to our regional territory, with almost 10 suicides per 100,000 inhabitants, concerning in particular young people. This is the worst figure in Italy. These numbers speak not so much about the need to find oneself in statistics, but about the drama of a situation which has expanded the meaning of the term poverty. Today, we do not speak any longer about economic poverty. We have to include the dynamics of an educational nature, the inability to grasp the sense of responsibility and the value of belonging. Economic and educational poverty feed each other. The inability to read one's own history, to speak an understandable language, to seize opportunities, to be close to others, reduces today the access to the life of the world. The idea of easy success and a focus on consumer goods rather than on stories has widened the gap and further highlighted the inequality. The lack of responsibility then always leads to addiction. Choose easy, almost mechanical routes. I do it because everyone does it. This drives people away from the conquest of autonomy, from emancipation, from need. And people just delegate or claim just because they are indigent. For this reason, the request to draw up a family budget, to learn to choose what is necessary, to rethink a different model of daily life could help more than to buffer just the current difficulties, but to live within a process, within a responsible long-term project. Finally, a further cause of exclusion is the lack of a sense of belonging, the impossibility or unwillingness to share needs and resources, problems, but also opportunities. The sense of belonging allows you to recognize yourself in your own situation, to know how to look beyond shame and humiliation, creation, starting from sharing one's fragilities and knowing that resources and opportunities can only be found together. The sense of belonging, among other things, also helps to support a better self-esteem, and above all, it allows us to restore hope, because feeling part of a community helps you to be part, to take it in hand, to grasp control, knowing that you are not alone and that everyone belongs to others and needs the other. As for the housing topic, we have a situation which is very problematic for those who do not have any housing. The housing services for homeless people with over 200 guests have required an extraordinary intervention, which resulted in the 24-hour opening of the housing structures for the homeless. The complexity of the human situations, the migratory element with its increasingly twisted dynamics, the fear of contagion and of the future, certainly did not help and are not helping. So, I would like to ask, do you really think that before 2020 everything was really functioning so well? Was the balance that we lived in a real source of stability? Or do you not think that these new poverties are nothing more than old inequalities that simply came to light in such a particular moment? So if we want to be sincere, we have to start by rethinking how we used to be. This is the only way to look at a new model of community that can transform identities from stubborn to hospitable. Today, emergency interventions are no longer enough. Quite the opposite. They could be even dangerous. And also, the institutional reactions, administrative reactions, are not sufficient. So to avoid the outbreak of a social conflict, we have to start a serious long-term political thought. We need an overall social philosophy capable to understand the situation we live in, to know and identify the limits and the potential, and to understand the priorities, not only for today, but also for tomorrow. There are at least two priorities that we should take into account: a new employment policy and a new housing policy. The continuous search for jobs, the need for complicated criteria, the flight of workers, especially from Eastern Europe, the exploitation of manpower, the difficult balance between family needs and work are exacerbating a working situation that goes hand in hand with the tragedy of a housing policy which is almost non-existent because of the prices of the rents, the request of impossible guarantees, and the impossibility to access because of any type of diversity. And this is the area where we need tools capable of understanding change, of supporting it, not just improvised actions or easy slogans coming out of the emergency. This is a commitment which requires a constant relationship and effort by the public and the private sectors, a good network which are not based on sudden actions. And this is the only way to overcome the increasingly problematic social inequality that sometimes is supported by the bureaucracy. And I'm going to close quoting the words of an important person. It is important to overcome fear, and I will quote Alexander Langer within an interview delivered a few years ago. She left us some interesting words as a proposal to overcome inequalities. He wrote, "The motto of the Olympic Games, Citius, faster, Altius, higher, Fortius, stronger, could represent the core values of our civilization: faster, higher, stronger. I would like to propose the opposite, lentius, profundius, and suavius, thus overturning these terms: slower rather than faster, deeper rather than higher, with more tenderness rather than with more muscles." The first step, taking Langer's words into account, is to use slow verbs, to think, to reflect, to avoid acting on the impulse of emergency or slogans, and to avoid giving in to the instincts of arrogance. We need to listen, and we cannot do that in isolation. The first resource is the network. It is fundamental to constantly listen to each other, drawing comparisons, and also between organizations, associations, between the public and the private infrastructures. The network helps to avoid the risk of running alone, to overcome the forms of spontaneity, where sometimes the answer arrives even before having listened to the question. This is the reason why I would like to underline that the Caritas centers, when I talk to the volunteers, I insist on that, the centers should be listening centers. First of all, the second step requires deep verbs, profound words, to distinguish, to deepen, to overcome generosity, to build relationships, offering tools capable of supporting processes of humanity. The second resource can be identified in accompaniment. To overcome welfare assistance, people must be accompanied, supported. It means to stay together. It means to walk with others and not on others. It takes time, humility, wisdom. Accompanying is a process aimed at making individuals autonomous and full of dignity. And I think that the thousands of volunteers acting here in Trentino Alto Adige are fundamental precisely because of this reason, because it is thanks to them that people can be accompanied and supported while trying to be including in the social and community life. In 2020, 59% of our activities were basically food contribution. Nowadays, we see the increase of actions of accompaniment to help people enter into social life aimed at looking for housing and for a job. Finally, the third step concerned the sweet, the tender verbs, to lower the tone, to express the value of each individual, to eradicate indifference, to recover harmony of staying in the world today, together, to face social clashes, wars among the poor. The third resource, which is the pedagogical address of Caritas, leads to the need to re-establish the style of sharing, which means to feel protagonists in the justice and solidarity paths. Sharing means to feel protagonists and beneficiaries at the same time. It leads to the identification of new resources, to discover other forces, to create together, from time to time, new community experiences. Sharing means experiencing a common growth, recognizing the needs and resources starting from the direct experience of people, supporting long-term investments so that projects can be identified to enhance all the social dimensions of a territory. The most beautiful experience that we proposed as Caritas was the proposal accepted by over 100 young people who responded with enthusiasm to a call to make themselves available to those who were struggling the most. The contribution between the novelty of young people and the experience of adults, between the richness of volunteers and the professionalism of the professionals, which was not always easy, has become the style of a really supportive community. A verb that this time has taught us choose. Indeed, the word crisis has the etymology of choosing. So crisis becomes a call to decide, to make a decision, an opportunity to make choices, a task for everyone, for institutions as well, from volunteers to institutions, from the church to the school, from sports to the family. To choose becomes the verb of the future, a continuous education to be there in a new way, to implement all the conditions in order to make everything livable, supportive, and human, our existence, which is either collective or cannot be there. Thank you for your attention.
Grazie veramente ad Alessandro Martinelli della Caritas Diocesana.
Thank you, Alessandro Martinelli from Caritas Diocesana, for your in-depth analysis of what pandemic causes into society, into its relationship. We have a couple of minutes for possible remarks and questions from the audience here in this conference room. I would like you, please, to quote again what you said. You said that we're experiencing a new poverty with new nuances. This poverty is not only on an economic level, but also an educational poverty. It's a poverty where thoughts are poor, and I think this is rather important as a sentence that you said. So what do you think we can do singularly? Well, I believe that when we try
sbrigativo di risolvere
to solve the problem of poverty. We do it superficially through money, but today actually we need
dal mio punto di vista, dal nostro punto di vista, è l'elemento centrale che questa pandemia ha portato a galla.
Focus on the central element that the pandemic highlighted, the educational poverty and also the scarcity of profound thoughts. Education is one of the best words because educate means taking out the best from each person. Sometimes we did the opposite for a long time. Sometimes we put information, thoughts, ideas, projects in the minds of people without having a real relationship with this person. We need that this person make emerge their own personal thoughts with their own responsibility. This is why the poverty of thought is dramatic. Today, also, daily life rhythms don't allow us to think. We don't have the time to focus on projects which could be long-term projects about living together, being together, and we see this these days. Of course, the media, the means of communication, social media, are slogans, are statements, are sentences which sometimes are very easy, immediate, but they don't really lead us to think. They lead us to transform ourselves in executors, and tragically also they lead us to belong to categories, and this is the dramatic part, because categorization, separating each other and being part of pre-established categories lead us to struggle in living together in the territory. Sometimes the single thought and the absent thought favor these categories, which lead to a social war, a social fight, and this is what we can see now, and this is worrying. Even thinking that we want to be an educating category, so we don't want to give and to do, but we want to help people think. We want that people have their own responsibility. So I would like you to ask, what are these labels, these categories nowadays? We have noticed when we opened the first service centers that were necessary. Well, we noticed that in Trentino, where, for example, the reality between local Trentino and foreigners seem, in theory, rather tranquil, actually we saw that there was the contraposition between Trentino coming to Caritas, and these people used to say, you have to help local people, you have to stop helping foreigners. So foreigners went away because they felt they were a minority group. So we had to highlight that we are helping everyone, regardless of their history. The other categorization, which is dramatic, is the fact of considering the person starting from their needs, but not starting from understanding who these people are. It's not a question of dignity, but it's a question of saying, I have the possibility, the capacity of helping you, that you are poor. And in the word poverty, we don't know what's in it, because sometimes it's not economic poverty. So we found a lot of categories, like the good ones and the bad ones, those who can give and those who have the right to receive. Sometimes we have some difficulties to help donations, and I'm going to give you 2 examples. We received important, relevant donations. Someone told us, we can see that this sum of money is very relevant, but we want that this money is allocated only to the local people because they are the most important people. The others, the foreigners, have always received donations, so they don't need it. And also those donating food said, we only donate pasta to the foreigners because, of course, with pasta you cannot solve the problems, but this should be pasta going just in one category. And the other dramatic point was the difficulty, which was intergenerational, so the difference between young people and elderly people. And we experienced this in Caritas with our volunteers. The average age of the volunteers in Caritas is over 70 years old. The volunteers in Caritas told us we should insert the young people so that the young people could insert themselves in a community thought. We did so. The bishop appealed to the young people, but the young people were together with the adults, and the adults said, look, we've always done like this, and we adults were going to tell you what to do. You don't have to think, you just have to do what we tell you to do. So half of them left. We had to reconquer somehow to re-attract the young people and change the communication. We had dramatic experiences about the fact that there was a disgregation in the categories. Homeless people are even more desperate. They are out of the games. The categories break all the family tissue as well. And we can see this situation daily on our territory.
Grazie davvero
Thank you very much, Alessandro Martinelli, for your witnessing and for your anecdotes about the situation in Trentino. I think that this first part is closed, so we can carry on with the second speech in this section of the Congress, which is COVID and the social fragility and vulnerability. So what you highlighted is very obvious, and thank you for your personal help. You will receive from the organizers a gift for thanking you to participate in this Congress. Thank you very much.
Proseguiamo ora con un collegamento in remoto.
We're going to carry on with an online speech with the title University Mobility and the Impact of COVID. Frederic Spagnoli is going to be our speaker. Yesterday there was a representative of the Marini saying Spagnoli. Maybe this is the right pronunciation because of your French origin. I say that in the Italian way, Spagnoli. I hope you don't take offense. Spagnoli is connected. He is origin from Trentino, from Volano. He's associated professor of the Italian language at the University of Besançon in France. He's the delegate of international relations, and he's the director of the Italian department. As we said earlier, he's the coordinator of the project Sliding Doors on Migration.
mobilità universitaria e l'impatto del Covid.
So the title of his relation is University Mobility and the Impact of COVID. You will have 30 minutes for your speech and 15 minutes of the question and answer. So you won't see me showing you that you only have 10 minutes, but I'm going to remind you this through my words. Welcome very much. What's the weather today in France? Well, today it's gray. We have sun here in Italy. So I will now give the floor to Frederic Spagnoli. So today I'm going to tell you something about the university mobility and the impact of COVID. Of course, I'm going to give you my experience at the University of Franche Conté. We have been relationship international mobilities for 10 years now, and since the beginning of this year, we analyzed the situation. So let's see if I can go to the next slide. So I will divide my speech into points. I will give you a general presentation of the new contest and the new university mobility before and after and during the pandemic, giving you the example of the University of Franche Conté, and then the evolution from the years 1920 to the years 21-22, from the lockdown, the green pass, and the curfew. The university mobility in 2010 had a new importance, which was fundamental for the international mobility of universities. And I'm speaking about international rankings and international activity, but also it has an educational and social role because of the mission of the university, that is sending and receiving students all over Europe, which is very important for an educational path, and it enriches the portfolio of students. So this mobility is for professors, researchers, administrative staff, but also of students, and above all. According to the last study by UNESCO, we have 225 million of students in the world. 1% of which represents an increase between 2017 and 18. Of these, 5.6 million of students are moving, and that is 2.5. According to UNESCO, they foresaw an increase by 31% in 5 years, which is an increase of the population of students in total. Europe is the first reception area in the world, and the second area of sending students. The most attractive countries are the US, with a little bit less than 1 million. Then we have the United Kingdom. And then we have Australia, Germany, Russia, France, and Canada. Canada is on the 12th position in 2018. So the objective in attracting international students, good students, and talents, which can then work in the businesses of the country, and when they come back, this is the so-called soft power, so the indirect influence on a cultural, social, political level that they can have on their origin country. France has always been a country which recruited international talents. And at the start of 2010, France was at the 4th place, but now it is reaching the 5th place, being taken over by Canada. As for outgoing mobility, so where do these students come from? They mainly come from China, about 1 million from Germany, India, Vietnam, South Korea, France, about 100,000 students, USA, Kazakhstan, Nepal. So you can see a prevalence of the area of the Pacific Ocean in Asia. So for this, in France, in order to attract these talents, in France we launched in 2019 a new strategy of reception and welcoming these foreign students. Bienvenue en France, welcome to France.
Benvenuti in Francia. Partendo dalla constatazione.
And we realized that the main origin countries are Africa and the Middle East, above all Maghreb and Sub-Saharan Africa, because, of course, of the heritage of colonization by France in these areas. So we have the will of attracting Asiatic students, Asian students, and this is what also the UK, Australia and the US are doing, and we want to imitate them. And of course this led to an increase of the enrollment fees. So if you start with a bachelor, you have to pay from 170 euros to 2,270 euros. If you want to enroll in a master's degree, you should pay from 243 euros to 3,770 euros. And again, you can see how this could change from one course to the others. This led to the creation of a certification of Bienvenue en France. This mobile was launched from one day to the other. Of course, even if the government said that there wasn't a certification, so the welcoming of students should improve, and the certification wasn't present at the moment, but this led to many problems. Many universities, among which the University of Franche Conté, didn't want to make foreign students pay the different levels of taxes, so they pay just a flat fee. So we have roughly 25,000 students, so 2,400 students can avoid paying the taxes, and we make so for foreign students. Of course, also French students can enjoy these benefits. So this created a new interest towards the bilateral cooperation, and this created delocalized campuses like the French Senegali campus. So this strategy, launched in 2019, had the idea of attracting Asian students, and this led to an increase of the university fees. The experts, diplomatic experts in China, for example, realized that Chinese students, if these students pay 190 euros, it means that the quality of the education is low. If you pay more, it means that the quality of the education is higher. And the same is true for the US. They pay roughly $35,000 a year. So this strategy, on which I have a negative personal opinion, but I think that this strategy is part of what we have as a mobility on a European level. That is the program Erasmus Plus. In 2018-19, more than 335,000 students received a mobility project in joining the Erasmus Plus, which is plus 23% over 5 years. The first destinations are Spain, Germany, United Kingdom, France, Italy. And the origin countries are France, Spain, Germany, and Italy. So, which is plus 55% over the last years. The specificity of the Erasmus project, which means mobility within Europe, is the main part of our activities as international relations. So at the University of Franche Conté in Besançon, the University of the East of France, it is a medium university in comparison to the other French universities. It's a university of 24,000 students, which the main part of the region is Besançon. You can see, but we also have detached seats of the university in the other parts of the region. So we have roughly 10% of international students. The vast majority of the foreign students come from Africa, 58%, 70% from Asia, 70% from Europe, 6% from the Americas. This mobility, university mobility, it should be divided into two different mobility groups. The students' mobility, so-called planned and organized through programs such as Erasmus Plus, bilateral agreements among the universities, through the program like Victor Hugo, or other programs between France and the US. Other programs are ISEP or BCI. And as I was saying, the program Victor Hugo was born in Besançon. It's another program, the program Victor Hugo. This program is a cooperation program with Latin America. We have an individual student mobility, which means that there are no programs, there are a few bursaries, and with other typology of mobility. Usually there are bursaries in this program, but this not always have them. The students usually come in my faculty, in the humanities. This comes to this department. It is difficult to identify this individual mobility because it belongs as students, because they are the students then are classified as normal French students. So when the pandemic broke out, That was a great change for us. From the 17th of March to the 11th of May 2020, we had the first lockdown, and university in France had to close. Students had to go back home. Some students remained, but this was very hard. The situation had to be very spontaneous and difficult. We had to organize ourselves at the last minute. We had to let French people enter universities, but other people had to go back home. Some people, like from Taiwan, they remained in France, others left.
Soprattutto quelli con programmi di interscambi.
Of course, those who were coming from Africa to study, well, for them it was difficult to make them go back home. Many of them remained in France. So this created very big social problems, in particular because of the closure of economy. A lot of works for students weren't available. So many students on an economic level, well, struggled. They were in precarious situations, in particular international students. After, let's say, 1 month of lockdown, when people didn't know what to do, we didn't know who left and who stayed. So we organized a couple of initiatives, like the lending of computers and other material or food or hygienic products to students coming from the university and other associations. And on a national level, the government decided to drop the cost of the school canteen, so just for €1, people could get their meals. And at our university level, we have created a person, some staff, who would organize and administrate all this. The situation was very hard up until the start of May and up until the softening of the lockdown measures.
Frederic, siamo a 20 minuti.
You spoke now for 20 minutes. So at the start of the academic year 2021, we started normally with social distancing and masks. We were a little bit afraid, but of course we realized that mobility dropped, out and in mobility. And maybe the mobility, instead of being 2 semesters long, only lasted for 1 semester. I have a double degree. Well, actually, I deal with a double degree with the University of Trento in the department of Besançon. Became a red zone at the end of September, but red zone in the French area means just that we have an incident rate of it's not so high as the Italian red zone. So I had to explain to our Italian students that the red zone is not as severe as the Italian one, so people could attend their lessons. From the 30th of October to the 15th of December, the schools and the high schools were open, but and the universities as well, but they were actually online. From the 1st of January until the end of April, we had a curfew starting from 6 p.m. And this was in place in this in France. In January, there was some possible courses for students of the first years and some exceptions, international students. This improved the situation because there were some accompanying measures which were on the social plan were existing at that time. From May to June, we started to reopen progressively, but there were few online exams, there were few contacts with students as well. And now this year, 21-22, we established a normal restart of lessons. We noticed an increase of applications, also concerning the incoming and outgoing mobility. We see that the levels increased in comparison to the period before the COVID. So this, we can notice that the Asian continent is a little bit in a harder situation now. It's difficult to reach them. Some non-EU countries decided to have online teaching at 100%. Of course, this is difficult because the time zone is completely opposite sometimes. So Europe is not as central in mobility as it used to be 10 years ago. But now it's becoming to be back at the center of mobility. What we've noticed is that there has been different perception depending on the country of origin. The students starting from the third years of their bachelors, some of them have never have lessons in person, so they have some problems in socializing with the others. So we think that it is very important to focus on communication, and we hope that people can come to our lesson in presence, because we believe it is so important. To conclude, the students are always interested in going to different countries, although now it is assuming a hybrid form. This mobility is going hybrid somehow, above all in physical sciences, whereas in the humanities, mobility is still important. As we are shifting to a new program, Erasmus Plus 2021 and 27, we are going to have 80% more budget. There is going to be more inclusion and more topics. Maybe this could be a new opportunity for Europe, so that there are going to be more exchanges and intra-European relations. And with my wish, I conclude my speech, and I would like to thank you for your attention. Thank you, Frederic, for respecting the time for the speech. We have a couple of minutes for asking questions, so please come forward and state your name, surname. Anderle, Trentini nel Mondo. I am very glad to see and listen Federico in Italian. I admire you because you are a Trentino who had a great career in the world, and we are very proud about this Trentino who are so successful all over the world. And then you are doing a research activity in the field of migration, which is very, very important, and we welcome it with interest. Erasmus Plus 2001-2007 is going to be a very important opportunity, and we as Trentino nel Mondo could also consider this program, maybe helping it with our collaboration together with the University of Trento. So I believe that this could be a good idea. I remind you that Trentini nel Mondo has the objective of reinforcing the exchange and the interaction with Trentini nel Mondo also through these kinds of mobility, university mobility. I believe that university mobility is very important because it involves new generations of Trentini through international programs, but also through the program of Trentini nel Mondo, which is having bursaries so that Trentini of first, second and third generation, that is students wanting to go to Trentino. So our objective is to make these Trentini collaborate with the universities all over Europe. Thank you, Frederic. I'm looking forward to collaborating with you and with all people like you, Trentini, in the world who are so successful. Thank you very much.
Altre domande?
Do you have other questions? Frederic, beyond the figures of the presence of students in universities, online teaching, do you think has some consequences on the results of students? Do you think that usually thinking of the marks that they had before the pandemic and the marks that they have now during the pandemics through online teaching, do they think that there is a difference? Well, it depends on the students. For some, maybe there was a difference, but I think for the majority of them, they have better results when they are coming to the lessons in presence, in person. For those who cannot move, surely online teaching is useful for the emergency, but we are a provincial university, we are a medium-small university, so we have many students coming from the whole region, Franche Conté. So we think it is important that these students can have a contact between one another. So yes, I think that as for my experience, there are more negative points in online teaching. Surely then some students got used to it and it was an advantage for students working. But even working students are happy to come to lesson in person. There is another question here, so please state your name and surname and ask your questions to Frederic. Good morning. I also know Professor Spagnoli because many times I came to Trentini nel Mondo Congress. I am Lia Dimenco, I'm a teacher, I represent Abruzzesi nel Mondo. Well, I work with Erasmus programs, in particular with Litwinning, and I have organized many projects, and what I've asked myself as well, and I was impressed by it. Also, Ilaria Garanti stated it in the speech, in her speech. There is a lack of linking in the Erasmus program. There is not a direct contact from school, university, and to the world of work. So it is a little bit theoretic. There is no bridge. Mrs. Garampi highlighted that according to the European project, well, this should start from the elementary schools so that people can get used to growth and development in this direction, because we cannot just present an Erasmus program to students who have international exchange when they are 17 or 18, but they don't have a culture on this topic. Maybe they see Erasmus as an exceptional experience and not as part of a normal developing career experience. So I think it should be clearer, but this is my opinion. I don't know what you actually think. The second question I would like to ask you is, in the COVID era, we've noticed that at school students were in need of a psychological support. For us, it was very difficult. For us teachers, it was very difficult to conclude the year with our usual programs because it was difficult to teach online lessons. But there was also a psychological breakdown among students. And I would like to know what is the case among university students. Maybe they can organize themselves better. How was the situation? Well, I will start by the second question. At the university, we have created psychological counseling because there were many students struggling. Some of them dropped out school. They, of course, had also other problems. Maybe, as I was saying, they were short of money, but some students had psychological troubles linked to lockdown, and they couldn't manage the situation properly, and we had them. As for international students, well, both international and local students struggled. Some of them couldn't go back to their parents' houses. As for Erasmus, it seems that, as for your first questions, the new program is focusing on more transversality among universities. So, well, starting from the elementary school, well, maybe, I'm not sure, maybe starting from the middle schools, because I see that I grew up in a border area. In the elementary school, it is true there are programs with Switzerland, Germany. Well, this surely helps, but maybe we should have a more European perspective. So I would start rather from the middle schools. In France, there are trips organized for middle schools towards other European countries. And yes, I think it should be maybe supported, fostered in the high school. I don't really know this program, but I can see that my colleagues do this with different Italian institutions. And, well, this is more an idea to what the mobility could be at a university level. So maybe starting from middle schools, yes, I think that this would enable to to have a different mindset at high school. As for psychological counseling, we created with the master's degree of psychology, we have created some psychological support. People could call them, so that we then moved with our other activities, and then we analyzed how many people use these services, but I am not really sure about how many people. I guess 100 students use this service roughly. I'm not sure. In Besançon, in comparison to Paris, Lyon, Strasbourg, the situation was more limited because we have a lot of regional students. Thank you, Frederic, for your speech. Maybe we can close this part of the Congress. Thank you very much. Enjoy your Sunday in France. And before moving to the next speech, which is going to be online, I have to give you some information for the organization. You have to leave the rooms by midday, before lunch. So we're going to finish before lunch. So I would invite those who have their luggage in their rooms to take advantage of this time before lunch to free the rooms. You can put your luggage next to the reception. You'll find the Maximilian room where you can store your luggage. Sabina is also here. How many of you are going to have lunch here? So please raise your hands.
Il pranzo è previsto alle 12:15. Assolto anche questo compito, proseguiamo con la prossima relazione, che appunto, come dicevo, è...
As I was saying, the next speech is online. I hope that the speaker from Barcelona is connected. Can we start?
Ecco.
So, I can see myself multiplying behind my shoulders. I think one is enough. So I would like to welcome Miquel Angel Essomba from the University of Barcelona. He graduated in pedagogy. He's professor in pedagogy at the University of Barcelona. He's director of the magazine Perspectiva Escolar, director of training and trainers, intercultural trainers at the European Council. The topic of his speech is very interesting. I think Alessandro Martinelli will be very interested because you mentioned it. The title is Education as a Tool Against Social Exclusion.
Professor Essomba, I would like to remind you that we have 45 minutes for your speech, 30 to deliver your speech, and roughly 15 minutes for a possible debate. I will tell you when you have spoken for 20 minutes, so that you can have a rough idea of how much time you still have available to complete your speech. Is that okay with you?
Perfect.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Allora, la parola
So I now give the floor to Professor Miquel Angel Essomba. Welcome to the conference.
Tantissime grazie, signore.
Thank you very much. It is a pleasure for me to be here today.
Allora farò la mia presentazione.
I will deliver my speech in English because I can express myself better.
Well, my lecture, my keynote speech will be on education as an instrument against social exclusion. This is a very important topic because when people move from one side to another, it is not always a perfect trip. It is not always a wonderful welcome from the host country. There are some trouble. And sometimes these stories end up in social exclusion. And be sure, one of the most powerful tools to fight against this social exclusion derived from these situations of moving from one country to another is obviously education. That will be the core of my presentation. There will be 4 parts. A first part to talk about social exclusion. We think that education is a powerful tool, as Nelson Mandela used to say, to fight against social exclusion. We need first to wonder what social exclusion is, what dimensions it has, and what are the practical consequences in daily life, both for native migrants, whoever in our European societies. Once we have reflected on the what, I kindly invite you to introduce yourselves on a reflection about the why social exclusion exists, which are the main features which characterize this social phenomenon. And thinking about the why, we will be able to find out the keys for overcoming this phenomenon. Third, I would like to give for sure some guidelines and practical ideas on how to use education to fight against the social exclusion that is the core element, the core component for our speech. And finally, I would like to give a snapshot on the European context regarding education and social exclusion concerning migrants. Starting from the beginning, I would like to introduce first idea on that, and I'm trying to, excuse me, there is a problem with the computer, and I need to fix it. Hold on, and sorry for the inconveniences. And that's it. All right, and then we've got the presentation here. We just go to the beginning like that, and now we start with no problem at all, solved. Well, concerning the what is the big problem for social exclusion? And thanks for your passion. The big problem is that we are a diverse society. We live in diversity. It is sure if you have a look at the audience in this meeting, you will see that there are men, there are women, there are those who are not even men or women, there are people who are elder, there are young people, there are people coming from here, coming from there. Diversity is the main characteristic of our society. And this is a reality. So no one can deny this reality. But what's wrong? What's happening with that? The thing is that sometimes for some people, this reality is positive and they wish to take advantage of it. People working together, no matter what their origin, what their background is, cultural, social, economic. However, there are some other people who consider that diversity must be valued as something negative. And I would even say, I dare to say, that this is something that happens for the majority of our societies. Diversity is more and more acknowledged in our European societies. However, for a majority, this is still a negative issue. And just have a look at the picture. For some countries, for some social groups, diversity is something that needs to be neglected, denied. And education is something, is an instrument to modify the individual characteristics, to modify the individual diversity that each human being is contributing to the humankind into a specific standardized framework with the same characteristics, with the same values, with the same behaviors. Most of people have fear against diversity because this creates a sort of disorder, and order is the most precious and valued issue for most of the people in our societies. How to deal with that? Just have a look at some examples in Spain, and I figured that in your societies it's not really different. Maybe you may have a look at the top right side of the screen, an image with a racist message: Spain for the Spaniards. This is pure racism in the Spanish society. And this is happening today. This is not something from the past. These are updated images in the Spanish society. On the top left side of the screen, you will see a sort of silly, stupid joke against feminist women that are mostly considered as Nazis because they defend equality between men and women. There are men who reject this sort of understanding, and that is the reason why they fill the streets with advertisements, getting fun with that, unfortunately. If you have a look at the down right side of at the bottom right side of the screen, you will see a terrible picture denying the Holocaust. There are still people in Spanish society, I figure it's not a single one in Europe, who are denying the Holocaust, that the Holocaust existed sometime. And at the bottom left side of the screen, you will see an image with a homophobic content, something that is also pretty common in our Spanish society. We've had some aggressions against homosexuals and lesbians in our society, and it is a big issue in Spain now, despite the laws and despite the moral. So that's the reality. There is a big bunch of people in our societies who deny the fact of diversity because they consider it is negative for living together, and they prefer to build up a society of equal people, but not equal in rights, equal in features. And we have to wonder why this is happening, why this is a substantial component of our European societies. And there is nothing better to explain the reasons why than reminding the ugly duckling tale. I am sure that in all the European countries, in Italy, Spain, France, and others, our children know about this sad tale where a duck, a mummy duck, has some little ducks, and there is one that looks different to the other, and it is rejected by its own family because of its own features. He does not look like the others, and this means in practical terms that he cannot live together with some other people who share some common physical features. What is the understanding? What is the learning behind this terrible tale that everyone knows because it was heard sometime during our childhood? Well, the first lesson of this tale is that we all aim to be normal. We must be normal. And being normal means that we mustn't differ physically, mentally, in values to the others. That's the first lesson with this tale. Be aware when you tell this tale to your children. Second lesson of this tale, since we need to be normal and we aim to becoming normal when we grow up in our societies, we must join those who look like the majority. If we look like a minority, we must be refused, like the little ugly duckling. Third, if we look like the minority, our destiny is exclusion. We mustn't be together with others who do not look like us. And what is more, fourth lesson, if we wish to be included, we mustn't insist on being a part of this majority. We must give up this group and look for our own group. So the single way to stay with the group we are, where we were born, is to give up our own identity. If we do so, maybe we have some chances to get included and not to be excluded. And final lesson, diversity is a chaos, and order matters. And order is identified with homogeneity. This is terrible, but this is true. These are the ideas behind the rejection of diversity in our societies. And to move on and overcome this disgrace, to be honest, we need to process in two steps. We need to move into two phases. A first one, to deconstruct ourselves, because our stereotypes about society, about our stereotypes on diversity, on those who look different, on those who have different values or cultural background regarding to ourselves. We first need to deconstruct all these stereotypes and prejudices. And later on, we'll have the opportunity to reconstruct ourselves. But first, we need to deconstruct. And there is nothing better to move throughout these two phases than education. That is the key issue. That is the reason why education is so important to move on this deconstruction and reconstruction process. How shall we do that? How education plays a prominent role to achieve it? Well, it's a long path. It is not something that can be done from today to tomorrow somehow. It is not an automatic process. It requires a long and patient process ahead. And this process has mainly 3 steps. First one is to change our perception, and move from difference to diversity. We need to get rid of the word difference from our vocabulary, from our syllabus, to understand and reflect about social reality. Because when you use the term difference, you automatically, unconsciously, are dividing the group into 2. Those who look normal and those who look different. And there's no need to state that those who look normal are the right ones and those who look different are the wrong ones. So using the term difference to talk about people in our society is not really supporting the idea, the notion, not of social exclusion, but of social inclusion. And education is a wonderful framework to work deep in order to change this mentality. No more difference, but diversity. Because when you talk about diversity, you immediately realize that we all are diverse. Diversity is not a specific feature from one group or another, but the general and common shared feature of everybody in our society. So first of all, step 1 for deconstructing our stereotypes and prejudices and reconstructing a notion of social inclusion, no more difference, but diversity. How shall we do that? Well, for sure, we need to change our minds. How do we do that? When realizing that the intra-group differences exist. When we are eating a salad, it is a dish. There is no other words to express what the dish is, a salad. But a salad is composed by different elements. And we need to realize that the big value of a salad is that the components of this dish look different and they are all diverse, moving from the difference to diversity. So we first need to realize the intra-group differences. Groups are not homogeneous, but heterogeneous. This is one of the things that education must foster when taking place at schools, in non-formal settings, whatever. And the second thing to change our minds is also to realize the inter-group similarities. When we use the we and the they, or even more, the we and the you, we are not really describing, we are not really drawing the reality of our diverse society. Because maybe with some other groups, we have some more in common than initially expected. So we need to change our minds through education. Education is a wonderful platform to do it, to have a group of children or adults and work, for instance, with this image, with this picture about the salad, and reflect about the intergroup differences and the intergroup similarities, and then we reach our challenge. Let's go to the second step. We were talking about a matter of perceptions, But there is also a matter of prepositions, because when we live together, we often draw relationships in terms of conflict. Me and you look different, therefore we are supposed to have a conflict. And obviously this conflict looks negative for our framework of living together somehow. So we are very used at thinking on you against me, or I against you, me against you. This is always the issue that we bear in mind. When Milan is playing against Roma, or Lazio against Inter, it is a competition, and one of the two has to win the match. This is our mentality. We grow up in societies when conflict is mostly solved through competition. But what about paying attention to leverage and thinking about a new frame on understanding the conflict? Why not to substitute the you against me into a you and me against our problem? Because I'm not saying that diversity is easy at all. I've never said that, neither during my speech nor ever. So diversity, living in diversity, is such a very complex issue for our societies. But being difficult doesn't mean that we must not bet for it. And we also need a change, not only of mentalities, but also of our hearts. We need to open up our hearts through education and understand that when you and I have a conflict because we don't look like to each other, and we don't share sometimes common goals, or we don't share a common cultural background, maybe it is also an issue that we need to deal with an open-minded, with an open heart somehow. And we need to change this you against me for a you and I against our common and shared problem. When you do that, things really change. And this means, in practical terms, that we need to feel empathy for the otherness first. We need to be more empathic. And empathy is not something, it is not a place for community building, the public space. So education can contribute positively to achieve that if schools invade the public space with children and youngsters going in the streets for learning about society beyond the school walls and creating a new sense, a new ethos of community somehow. Well, you see, education from my perspective, and I figured that from yours as well, is the key to change our minds, our hearts, and our frames. Education is not an automatic process. It is like planting some seeds on the soil and waiting for them to grow with the help of, for sure, our attention. And some basic features of this education to end up this speech. The first one, education must go beyond the school, and the core educational sense is located within the community. The school is necessary, but education goes beyond the school. Otherwise, we reproduce social exclusion processes. If we focus, if we put the attention on the community, lots of problems can be solved regarding social exclusion. If we only consider, for instance, in the case of migration, that schooling is the single place where we can fight against the social exclusion of migrant pupils, we will get wrong, because we are missing their parents, for instance, we are missing their organizations, and normally those realities don't come in the school. And what is more, the school is not entering, is not coming in these community realities either. There are no bidirectional processes of exchanging between community and school. And this is something that needs to be overcome in our current days. Second issue to achieve that is that the participation and decision-making processes, educational and other, must be more horizontal than vertical. It means more democratic. Let's reflect ourselves about the democracy, the internal democracy in our organizations, as well as in our schools. Is it really something that exists? Is it something that we may say, yes, we are democratic. All the participants, all the people have the same right to express their feelings, their ideas. Let's be if it can be possible or not in that sense. Third idea, participation must go from internal school processes to external dynamics rooted within the community. The school mustn't be a place where some contents, some curriculum contents must be reproduced, but a place to reflect about our society problems, the problems that we are living in our community, and to find out solutions and implement those solutions in our own communities. The school as a main actor for social transformation against social exclusion. Fourth idea, community education actions must become the meeting point of the different stakeholders engaged, and it must give a sense of belonging to all of them. In that sense, community education is like a big human tower of people pushing all together to create that sense, and the school can play an extraordinary role to achieve it. And final idea, community education should also promote both a quantitative increase of stakeholders and bonds and a qualitative improvement of their relationships. So it is not only a matter of understanding the who, but also about understanding the relationships that those who's are creating to each other. So the growing of a community, the community building issue is not only focused on the people, but on the relationships that these people create among them. Well, that was my speech for today. I hope that this might be interesting for you. And obviously, for sure, I'm very open to listen to you, your reactions, your comments, your ideas on how education can be a powerful tool to fight against social exclusion. Thank you.
Grazie al professor Miquel Angel Essomba, la sua...
Thank you to Professor Miquel Angel Essomba. Your speech was definitely very interesting. We now give the floor, we give time for some questions. I would like to ask, are there certain examples of this application in reality of the concepts that you have outlined there for situations and places where education is not a pyramid, is horizontal? Have you seen real examples of that?
For sure, there is plenty of examples around, and one of the most remarkable ones are the Educating Cities movement. I figured that maybe you are living in one educating city, but I was wondering whether you know that you are living in an educating city. Since 1990, a movement of educating cities was set up to foster that notion, more than 30 years working on that community perspective and understanding that education is something that it is not only at schools, but in the society, and that the responsibility of education is not something that must be exclusively focused on educational professionals, but on all those citizens in our societies. What is an educating city? It is a city which gets committed to introduce an educating sense of living in the frame. And I will put some practical examples. Are we seriously considering the voice of children to design the public parks in our city? First question. Second question, are we seriously considering the prominent role on training and education of our entrepreneurs in our companies, in our local companies? Are hairdressers, people in some other negozio, are there people having a sense and an understanding of themselves as being educators when they are playing their professional role? More questions. Are we taking advantage of our cultural heritage and making the chance, giving the possibility for migrants to take part of it and take the opportunity to contribute with their background to that? These are concrete questions that, for instance, educating cities are replying with concrete measures. And for instance, educating cities are the ones that when they design the urban public space, they count on participatory processes of children. In Reggio Emilia, you have very wonderful examples on that, on how childhood is a key issue to participate, to define, because at the end, it will be children the ones who are going to enjoy that public space. And the participatory process is a way to create relationship. It is, at the end, an excuse to create that. When we think about small companies and vocational education and training, and we think about the important participation of youngsters in those places, it is not the same when, for instance, these small companies belong to a network where they are well trained as educators. And this is something that, for instance, in Barcelona, we often do. We have networks of small companies that are strongly committed to train those youngsters outside the vocational education school, and they share experiences on how to improve the motivation, the participation of those youngsters, and how to empower them in their own professional careers. And we also have some concrete examples of coordination between migrants associations and cultural sites in our educating cities in order to contribute that the cultural background takes a part of this city, because those migrants mustn't feel excluded and they must be a part. This is a wonderful example of integration and inclusion instead of exclusion. I could also give more examples about the schools where, for instance, we have classes, language classes, given by the students themselves to their own parents, for instance, and then the migrant parents who do not master the school language, they have the opportunity to learn it through these processes and create community. The examples are numerous, and I kindly invite you to visit the website of the Educating Cities webpage so that you will be able to have a look at hundreds of experiences on how to translate those principles that I've shared today with you into reality.
Grazie, terremo presente questo suo invito.
Thank you. We will certainly welcome your advice. If there are no further questions from the audience, I could declare your speech concluded. I would like to thank you, Professor Angel Essomba from Barcelona, and we would like to ask you, how is the weather like in Barcelona?
It's getting chilly, unfortunately. 1 week ago, the weekend was wonderful. It was nearly springtime, but since last Tuesday on, it's getting chilly. Well, it's the autumn already now. I hope that you are having a better weather in your venue.
Ma c'è il sole o è nuvoloso?
No, it's sunny.
Is it sunny or cloudy?
Anche qui a Levico c'è il sole e fa freddo.
It is sunny here in Levico as well, and chilly as well, so we are on the same kind of climate situation. Thank you for your presence here today. Have a nice Sunday.
Bye. Thank you.
And now I go.
L'intervento appunto del professore Essomba, abbiamo concluso
So we have concluded the speeches for today, and as always, now we'll have a final moment with some remarks about the 3-day Congress. Vittorino Rodaro, Vice President of the Association, Vittorino nel Mondo, of the Association Trentini nel Mondo, the Vice President Vittorino Rodaro will say something about our Congress. Vittorino Rodaro has also been working in the European world. In 2001, 2013, he was the director of the Office for the Relationship with Europe in the province of Trento, in the field of Euregio. So he's got the difficult task of summing up and giving some consideration of what was said during these 3 days and what can be the remarks and the reflections. So this task is not very simple, but I will try. I will start expressing a heartfelt thank for this Congress, which is so important and relevant. I would like to say thank you to the speakers able to really attract our attention in these days of work. And I would like to say thank you to the staff of Trentini nel Mondo, who still offered a great management and organization of this initiative. And I would like also to highlight their sensitivity and competence in in choosing their speakers. And I would like to say thank you also to the technicians who helped us to follow the online conference. And I would like to say thank you also to the interpreters. Yes, I would like also to say thank you to the technical staff for the audio, the videos, and the online transmission, also on YouTube of our Congress. So I would like to say thank you to Claudio, Eugenio, Gabriele, and Mattias from IRITI, the technicians who accompanied us in these days. And I would like to say thank you to the interpreters. And I would also say thank you to Serena, Patricia, Roberta, and Silvia. So thank you very much. So I would like to sum up what were the essential lines on which these initiatives developed. First of all, the COVID pandemic is still hitting all the European countries. All these countries at the beginning undervalued the severeness of the viruses, and they were unprepared to face it. In Europe, COVID has strengthened the gaps on sociological, territorial, and economic level, and we've heard this in the words of Marina Marti. And COVID led to an increase of the social inequalities in all member states. All economic sectors were influenced by that. There were dismissals, unemployment, particularly severe, are also the consequences on countries with working with the tourism, like Portugal, Italy, Spain. And also, elderly people were severely hit by COVID because many of them died. Young people were also hit by the pandemic.
Da quasi tutti I relatori al fatto che insomma le università chiuse.
And we've noticed that many universities were closed. Young people couldn't socialize, couldn't have a relationship, and this really affected negatively our youth. Women also were forced to do housework and telework, and they were stressed in their households, as Mascherini, Maria Reina reminded us. She also underlined a worrying fact. There was an increase of child labor in Portugal. Devastating effects of COVID were also on other two categories, migrants and Roma, as we were explained by Bertoldi, Irina Pop, and Beneforti. As for mobility of workers, well, it was strongly conditioned. As for cross-border seasonal workers and migrants with temporary permits. Here I have to highlight the contribution by Irina Pop as for the situation of Roma, and also the lucid analysis of workers during COVID made by Emilio Santoro. It was also interesting to hear the speech of Alessandro Zenter about return migration of Italians into our countries. Also, in this phenomenon, there is a lack of analysis tools which can indicate us the quality of this return migration. What are the responses given to the pandemic? Well, we should say that on a European level, little by little, we reached a certain coordination of the activities, but the important thing was, above all, the preparation by the European Commission of a relaunch plan of recovery, of economic recovery, and next EU, Gen EU. It opens new possibilities of verification and of the behaviors of the European Union, which during the great crisis in 2008 didn't actually lead to good actions and effective actions. So the European Union and the European Commission with this relaunch plan is going to change its perspective. So we're going towards the sharing of the debt that the European member states may have contracted during this period in order to tackle the pandemic problems. So we should evaluate whether this change of paradigm may have some consequences, may work, or whether we should question the Maastricht parameters, which were at the basis of the monetary policy on a European level, and whether we are going to restart and to implement a profound change of the European Union. This shift is important because the European powers and relationships have been modified profoundly, also because of the pandemic. So will the European Union be able to have a role in this, or will it be considered a marginal reality within the competition among China, the US, Russia? And then there are also other international scenarios where there are new powers and trends emerging, which may be authoritarian. I'm thinking of Turkey or other countries internationally. This requires this change of paradigm needs to have a different approach. And we have understood this thanks to the use of the Foundation Megalizzi. We need to analyze Europe in a different way. Europe is already complicated. Europe is made of many elderly people, of many people managing power, and these people
di potere, insomma,
use this power, and they don't want to let some power to the youth. They don't make space to novelty, to fresh ideas, also in its language. So I believe that the future of Europe should be entrusted to the youth. We adults should step aside, not because we want to delete our presence there, but maybe we should be in the second or third row, and we should make available humbly our experience and our memory, but at the same time giving the youth the possibility to innovate Europe and to listen to new words. We adults need to learn. We need to learn from young people. And this is a perspective which I believe cannot be ignored.
A qualche intervento, no, che
So we should give more space to young people.
In occasione di convegni, in occasione di summit.
Also during conferences, international summits, like the one we're witnessing, COP26, about the climate. This, well, I believe that we need to reinvent the quality of our speeches, and also we should refresh the quality of our statements, for example on the social medias, and we can see in these poor thoughts words which are not inhabited somehow. We need to give some meaning to our words. This field needs a lot of work by our associations. Our associations must be more aware, and we should also search for new witnessing on our territories, and we also need to give hope. Hope should not just be an empty word. Hope should also be declined. Hope should also be done through concrete actions. We need to do something together, to act together. So I am concluding now. I would like to thank you for the patience that you have demonstrated, as well as your interest. So thank you very much, and I wish you a safe journey back home. Maybe anyone wants to add some remarks? You can do so, or
da giornalista se devo tentare di fare una sintesi estrema.
Maybe as a journalist I can sum up what happened in these 3 days, and I'm thinking of a title. The main enemy is the poverty of thought. You quoted it, you mentioned it, Vittorino, but also Alessandro mentioned it. The virus is the first enemy, of course, that we should fight and defeat, but also we should fight the poverty of thought. We should regain the awareness that people are important in the economic, political level that we are living in. So this is, I think, what emerged during this Congress. So I would really thank again Claudio, Eugenio, Gabriele, Mattias from IRIT, and I would like to thank the interpreters, Serena, Silvia, Patricia, and Roberta. So please give them an applause. And also I would like to remind you that next year, the next Congress as a UNAIE organized by Trentini nel Mondo, I would like to ask the president of Trentini nel Mondo, Armando Maestri, to officially close this Congress with a final greeting from the association. Please. Thank you, Maurizio. Also on my behalf, I would like to thank all the participants. I would like to thank UNAIE. I would like to thank all those who collaborated, the speakers. I am also a journalist, and I have noticed that there was an important fact this year. That is the coming back of Trentino politics in this Congress. It has been a long time that this Congress is existing. Every year, once a year, we speak about some important issues. I would like to greet today Sara Ferrari and Alex Marini, council members. I remind you that the autonomous province of Trento is a region in the geographic panorama in Italy. They arrived the first day of the Congress. The vice president of the region, an assessor, and another council member arrived in the first day of our Congress. So many Trentino politicians attended our conference, and I believe that this is a good sign. Of course, we are glad about this. So we're very happy about this. It is an important thing. We believe that from the wishes and the words of the politicians, we can also obtain concrete actions. Their politicians' presence highlighted the importance of our association. That is Trentini del Mondo, who's and I am the president of this association. This job, which aims to obtain internationalization, is fundamental. It is modern, and it is even always more and more important. Despite the pandemic, we managed to organize our Congress, although partially online. We will be back to normality, which will see us as always engaging for this Congress and for our topics. Thank you. Sorry, just one more minute. I would like to say that this year it was very important. As you know, in 2020 we didn't do any Congress, and so we caught up this year. This year we can see some audience in person. This is the first Congress at UNAIE without Ferruccio Pisoni, who was the president until 2009. He was one of the fosterer of the collaboration between Trentino nel Mondo, UNAIE, and EDSA. He has always been present in the organized Congress. He was always very interesting and passionate about what was proposed during the Congresses. He was a European MP. He passed away last year, and this is the magazine dedicated to him. He passed away last year on the 12th of December. So I would like to conclude this Congress which is the first Congress without him. I would like to thank him for what he did in the past. We are very grateful to him. He also promoted the existence of this Congress. So I would like to thank you all. Enjoy your Sunday. Have a safe trip back home, and see you next year, I hope.